And let me see what else is there. I'm trying to think of any more essay questions, read format. I mean, all of that stuff like character limit, word count. Like, listen, everybody has a different thing. Like, some's gonna be a 500 words, some's gonna be 200 words. Like, you follow what they say and don't go a word over. Like, do not. Like, don't. Like, follow instructions. Do what they ask. You might think it's nitty. Oh well, it ain't your program. So, if you don't want to do it, then don't. You don't have to submit. That's one less script that they have to read. No, you don't. Should you register with the WGA? Sure, if you want to. Yeah, I mean, why not? Um, I think one I did, and one I didn't. I don't know. I know one I for sure did, but yeah, go ahead and do it anyway. Why not? Just protect your stuff just in case. Um, and a lot of money. See, somebody said they did it was $15. So if you got 15, then you can do it. Essays. I want to talk more about, again, like I said, in those essays, because I think that people tend to like overlook them and like, do them at the last minute. Do not do them at the last minute because they are very important. So I would say, definitely pay attention to those. Make sure they say who you are and, and all that good stuff, and you'll be fine. And I'm trying to see if Karen Horn is here yet to talk to some of y'all. I don't know. I guess not. So I'll wait. But if you all have questions right now, just go ahead, and I'm looking on the side right here. Hiya, I'm waiting to get in. Okay, Karen's waiting to get in. Hold on. I'm finna yell like a fool. Gio! Okay.
Kurt, I'm here. Hey.
There we go.
There
Karen.
you go. Hi.
Can y'all hear Karen? Just like say yes. Yes. All right. So Karen was the head of Writers on the Verge and pretty much all things diversity and inclusion at NBC for Karen. I'm not going to say how many years. You can say how many years.
Almost 11.
Almost 11 years.
Yep.
So I had to sit in front of Karen the first time. It wasn't great. The second time was much better. And I'm just gonna sort of let her really sort of talk to you guys about what the reader and what they expect, like what they expect looking in when they're looking at a spec and or an original script. Like, what are you looking for when you read these things?
Well, thank you for having me, Kirk.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate it. Sorry for the quick introduction.
That's right. No, and by the way, thank you for doing this, because I think it kind of takes off the the mystical whatever about these writing programs and stuff like that. So I this is so cool that you do this. The NBC program, I'm not at NBC anymore. I'm with Warner Media Group now. So that's the Warner Brothers Writers Workshop. That's their program, and HBO has a writing program too. So I don't oversee those, but I'm there now. But anyway, so the NBC program, I also believe, are now taking originals. And so you should know that if you're going to apply, they're not taking specs this year. But if you're writing a spec, I would just say, there's so many shows that now the writing programs that are still taking specs, you may have gone over this, have a list basically of what shows that they will accept. And that's just because we want to know the show that you're writing. We want to be able to read it and give our opinions on it truthfully by knowing the shows. So those shows are generally given to the readers who are familiar with the shows. So the readers who work for these writing programs are oftentimes writers who've been in the program before, or they're also there's people that we've worked with for a long time that we trust that they know the type of writers that we're looking for, or the type of material that we're looking for. And they're actually told, at least from me when I was at NBC, they're told to look for, if it's a spec, do they get the show? Do they write in the true characters' voices for the show? Just simple things like that. Like, are you writing? Are you not writing something that is completely an original, just masked in a spec script? Um, uh, the goal of it is to really kind of to see if you're capable of writing someone else's words. And I think specs are a good practice to have. Still, there are good ways to kind of grease those wheels and get them going. So they're still good to have. Originals, if you're submitting an original, there's some things to consider when you're writing an original pilot. First of all, it is the why now. Like, why are we in this spot? Like, why are you writing this show now? That's a big consideration to get you into into your show. But the thing that I think we look for as writers is that can you build worlds? Are you a world builder? Are you someone who can tell a story? Can you build characters? I think characters are probably the most important thing. If you're watching television, you're watching because of the characters. And so can you form characters that are that people have an emotion about, like an emotional connection to, whether you love them or you hate them? Do we feel something from reading your material? So, I mean, I think those are some of the things for me, like a script that just stays with me. And I can remember, there are writers who've come through the many years that I've done this, not just at NBC, but before that at Nickelodeon and Disney. Like, there are writers that I still remember their material because it just stuck with me. And so you want to be one of those writers to do that.
I've been talking about essays because I think that people tend to either gloss them over and do them very last minute,
Mm-hmm.
or they tend to give like a woe is me sort of essay, like, feel sorry for me, this is why I should be a TV writer. So,
Right.
So I want you to
Yeah.
like, what do you look for when you're reading those essays? Like, I told them what I wrote, but what are you all looking for?
Look, don't dismiss the essays because they are really important. If you're a writer, you should be writing 100% of the time. And sometimes it's the essay questions that will push your submission over. If there are two scripts that are equal, the essay questions will oftentimes, we'll look at the essay questions and say, this writer wrote an essay question that I absolutely loved. I want to at least meet them. If you're choosing how many, people to meet out of thousands of submissions, then you want to bring in people that you're interested in. You want to know more about them, because a writer is not just on the page, it's like who you are and how you generate stories. So your essay questions are going to help us do that. So look, everybody had, grew up watching television, and that's why they want to be a writer. We hear that a gazillion times. Oh, when my so-and-so wasn't around, all I had to do was watch television. And so I love television. Everybody does. Like, you know what? That's something we've heard a gazillion times. More importantly, like, if that's true, then tell about something specific, like how it made an impact on you, how you watched television, but not just because you were a latchkey kid and you came home and television was your babysitter, but what impact did that make on you, and how does that impact influence you as a writer? Those are the stories that we want to hear and getting to know more about you. And take advantage of exploring like what you will bring to any show as a writer, the stories you want to tell, the all of those things that you want to do. Like, take advantage of that in an essay form, and don't ever discount them, because that's really something that sometimes just makes the decision. And here's a little tip. I don't know that the Warner Brothers Writers Program ever asked for essays before. but guess who's there now? So they're going to. So start thinking about like an essay. I don't know what it will be, because luckily I don't oversee the day to day, but I think they're going to ask some essay questions there too.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I say, guys, do not go like when I was in my writers group, like we spent just as much, not just as much time, but we were very particular about the essays that people were sending out. And so, and when I talk about like, it doesn't have to be like, woe is me, and it can be fun. I'm not one of the writers wrote she was entering a specific program, and her essay was about moving to Los Angeles, which is whatever. But it was about her learning to drive. And it was about her learning to drive at 40 years old because she was moving from the East Coast where she didn't have to drive to LA. And so the essay was about her learning how to drive and her having to leave her job in broadcast and coming into television. And so, like again, she told a really fun story about like learning to drive at an age where people think that doesn't happen. And then and it all that also shows like perseverance. That shows someone who actually wants to be a writer. And I thought that's something Karen would always talk about. It's like you have to show like, are you in LA? Are you in Wisconsin? Are you in what? Like if you are not like here, like how are you gonna be in Writers on the Verge? Yes,
Yeah.
you move and whatnot, but like you have to show like, yo, I want to be here and I'm gonna go through the same things that a lot of these other writers are going through. And that's how people get assistant jobs. And I'm not saying that like you shouldn't apply if you're out of state, because that's not it. I'm just saying like you want to show people that you actually want to do the things that you have to do to be a writer. And like
Yeah,
that's what that job.
I always say like, location, like even if you are on a show, you write on a show that ultimately doesn't take place in Los Angeles, not filmed in Los Angeles, the writers' rooms are still in Los Angeles. And you just, if you want to do it, and look, I know it's hard to just get up and move. And it's a hard thing to do. And I don't try to belittle the difficulty of doing that. But ultimately, if you want to write for television, you really have to be in Los Angeles. There's like, because people won't even take you seriously if they're interested in your material and you're not here. So even like if you are able to come like during staffing seasons and stuff like that, then you should do that. And unless you get into like the ABC Disney program, which gives you a salary and you can relocate from that, you really just have to be here. But even there, like they give you a salary, but you have to be here. You have to work. You have to be in Los Angeles for it.
Let's see what else. I would say, the interviews. Again, I joke about this all the time. Like when someone is sitting in front of you, like what are you looking for? Like
Yeah.
what says, especially when, because I say everybody like in the finals, like they're 20 whatever 18 people or whatever. These are people who scripts clearly everyone likes. So now it's like these are the what's the thing that stand out? What's the standout things in a person that says, okay, they deserve to be one of the eight?
Right. So generally, and this is not different than if you're lucky enough to, go into a showrunner's interview. If you get a meeting with a showrunner, they like your work, and so now they just want to see if who you are as a person. And I don't want to say that they like you or not like you, because ultimately it's about whether you can perform. But you have to realize is that in a writer's room, you're usually there for 10 maybe hours, maybe more hours, right, Kirk, a day. And
Yeah.
so they want to know if you're going to be someone who is going to lend or to participate enough to contribute to what's going on at that room. And they want to know that you're not just weird. Like I'm like, I often say to people, you got the meeting. Now just don't be a weirdo. Like when you're in the meeting, just, because this is like, I often say to people, like, it's okay if you know my background, if you know that I produced a show and I worked at NBC and blah, blah, blah. But like, if you know that I have a daughter and what her name is, then I'm going to be a little concerned about you. So like, you don't want to be a creep in a meeting. Like, you should do your research when you're in a meeting, and you should know about someone that you're meeting with in order to engage with them. To an extent, to just do your background. And if you're meeting at NBC, you should know about the NBC shows. If you're meeting at Warner Media or any of our entities, you should know about some of the things that we are doing. I would also say that you should also know your story. You should know what's going to be great. And Kirk, I won't go into too many details, but when we first met, I said to you, what about what you're telling me makes you a good writer? Like, you're telling me this about you. I'll never forget this. And I was just like,
I was so stupid. I was so lame and so dumb. And so I ain't even gonna say what I said because it was
no, I'm not either, because it's not my business to say, but I'm saying to you, but this is a good learning thing. It's like, what about that makes you a good writer? Like, I've heard a million stories before. Tell me how your story makes you a better writer. That's what I want to know. And
right.
tell me if, and by the way, folks, if you're a comedy writer, you should be a little funny in the room. I know you're like, duh, but guess what? If you're a comedy writer, you should be a little funny in the room. You should be affable. You should let me know what you're going to do. And I will also say, if you're comedy writers, you should have a social footprint. Like, you should be telling jokes on Twitter. You should be like, people should know your sense of humor, your point of view, what you're going to bring into the room. Like, you should have a little bit of a social footprint for someone to follow you, particularly if you're a comedy writer.
I'm just gonna look at a couple of questions. It says, "What
Okay.
do you wear to an interview?"
I'm sorry. It says what?
What do you wear to an interview? I'll just say, listen, don't look a mess, But like, I wear Jordans. I wear what my style,
Yep.
and whatever that's gonna be. When I went in the program, I wore like some weird looking shoes and some slacks and a bow tie, some weird shirt or something. So you want to sort of.
But I probably liked it. I probably was like, ooh, that's a good outfit. I like that.
So like, you want to be able to. Don't think that you have to go in there in a suit and tie. Like,
No.
Do not go in there in a suit and tie. This is not like, you're not going into corporate America.
Nope.
You want to look nice, but like, you don't have to be stuffy.
I would totally say, wear your personality, like, so don't wear something, that would totally turn someone off, if that's possible. But like Kirk said, this is not corporate. You're interviewing to be a writer. So you should let someone know that you took the effort, that, that you're coming in to meet with them. You took an effort, but you don't have to worry about, like, wear a funky t-shirt that says something about your personality. Wear something, that if it stands out, it'll stand out for a good reason and not for a bad reason. Like, do something that shows you as a personality. You are your product. You're selling yourself. And so what you should do is, like, if you're a person who, drinks water, or what's about the packaging that you love about that, like, whatever draws you to something, you should be able to sell yourself pretty much like you would do any product that you consume.
Right. I'm seeing something about resumes. Like, what are you all? Again, they were like, do you need to put your professional resume? Do you need to have things that show that you've worked in a business? I know mine was a little bit of both, but again, like, what is resumes?
Yeah, I mean, do a little bit of both, especially if you have industry experience. It is good to have people with industry experience. I often say to you that, I used to use the example of, like, I can, if you're in a room with Tina Fey, I can get you, I can teach you how to be a better writer in that room, but I can't teach you how to be cool that you're around Tina Fey. So, like, so industry experience is not necessary. There are people who've gotten into the program and who are well established in this industry, who didn't have any experience coming into it. but if you do have it, certainly put it on your resume. But also put like something, if it's relevant, about your life. Like if you in school were the president, whatever, of your chapter of something, that would make me go, what was that about? Like I want to know more about that. Or if used to milk cows, at 6 a.m. in the morning or something like that, to make someone go, oh, that's really pretty kind of interesting. I want to know a little bit more about that. Then put that on your resume. If something about you that you did makes you more unique, then absolutely include it on your resume. But your resume shouldn't be that long, because really we are looking at your material first and foremost. Then we're going to look at your essays, and then your resume is the last thing we'll look at.
I'm looking.
And oftentimes, by the way, the readers I know at NBC read blind. They don't even know who's submitting, what the material is. So they just get the script with no names on it whatsoever and no resume.
There is a question about whether people care if it's a network or a cable or streaming.
No, and then you'll see on the list, like whatever the list of, or even if it's an original, write you, like it doesn't matter. And the networks all believe that they are able to adapt a cable writer to a network anyway. So, and look, I think, there are some network shows now that push the envelope as much as many cable shows do anyway. So I would say definitely no one cares. No one cares. And I see someone just wrote about thoughts on act breaks for things. So I would say it's okay to include the act breaks, because that way we know better that you understand story. When act breaks are very good for showing your ability to write story. So even if you watch a show that's not a network show that has commercials, there are absolutely act breaks in every show, and you can tell when they are. So I would suggest, when you write, just write in the act breaks, even if especially if it's an original, even if it's intended for a streaming platform or something that doesn't typically have commercials, write the act breaks in there anyway.
Yeah, I would say, like, I'm looking at my orange spec right now. I remember I watched the show and I was like, okay, this feels like a 5-act break show. So then I was like, all right, I did my act breaks and then I just went and removed them. And what you'll realize, like in TV, sometimes the act breaks are written in. Sometimes showrunners or writers, they will find the act break in the edit. It is really different for each show, but typically, especially if the show does have commercials, then you're going to be writing towards those act breaks because those commercials ain't going nowhere. So,
no, they stop.
so you have to know how to write towards those act breaks. Like, what are the things is it a cliffhanger? Is it excited? Is there a new piece of information that they're going to find? So every act break, we should be moving forward in story, and they should be wanting to flip that next page to see what's going on in act 2. And so, and when I was in Writers on the Verge, I wrote a procedural. So part of it was I had to make sure that all those procedural beats were there, that first clue, that that a misdirect, that and so you have to figure out where all those things are going to land in your specific pilot, and typically those are going to revolve around your act breaks, like that first clue, ooh, now they're on to something else, that misdirect that gets them into more trouble, now they're in trouble, and you're going to go. And so, like, those things, you have to learn to write towards those. And I guess I've been on shows that have done both or either or, but even then, like, act breaks are kind of kept in mind, especially when you have to pitch the show, because it's easier just to follow that way. Here's a teaser and we're doing 4 acts, or here's a teaser and we're doing 5 acts. And so you're able, and it just gives you structure, which I think sometimes is just good. So you're just not writing too much and too long, like you're your scenes mean something, your acts actually mean something, and you're just not going all over the place with your story.
Yep.
How important are letters of recommendation?
Well, no problem for I think letters of recommend NBC doesn't. I don't know if doesn't ask for letters of recommendation for the writing program. I don't know. I don't know who else. I think Disney, ABC Disney does. Look, they're helpful to know you as a person. Oh, good. ABC doesn't anymore. I hate letters of recommendation for writers. They're good for directors. They're not so good for writers because I don't care. Like what's on the paper is is your letter of recommendation. So your script is a letter of recommendation. I guess, a letter of recommendation, because honestly, like I've gotten throughout my career so many letters of recommendation from showrunners who have their writer's assistants that they want to pawn off on me instead of hiring them themselves. I'm like, if they're so great, you should hire them too, but so I personally don't feel like letters of recommendation will help me. They have never made me hire a writer over someone who never has had a letter of recommendation.
All right, I'm just looking at some of, I feel like a lot of these questions we have answered. I'm going through Twitter because people,
Go, yeah.
let me see, would you, no, I'm not doing that. On bio, we talked about that. Actually, we talked about the essays. I know some programs ask for like a specific, like an essay, and then some ask for like a personal statement or a bio. I think ABC does. Again, just be personable. Don't be standard. Really tell a story that takes people on a journey, just like you would if you were writing a script, because they want to understand that you understand story and highs and lows and all of those things. And so the same thing that would be in a script, they should be in all of the essays and personal statements.
Absolutely. Yep. For sure.
Let's see here. Let me see. What do you do when a TV writing fellowship is over? Okay, well, listen. All right. So I was going to get a little bit more into this when Julian and Latoya hop on in a couple of minutes, but that's a good, smooth introduction. Listen, the programs are there for you, and they're going to let you know, like, Karen will let us know this is not a staffing program. This is a program where you will meet executives, they will read your material, but there is not a guarantee there will be staffing. Then there is, ABC, where you're going to be staffed on a particular show. I think Warner Brothers, typically you do, and they're all different. I think CBS, you get a mentor and something like that. So what was...
Well, Kirk, I will say you got staffed before the program was over and haven't stopped working yet. So I'll jump in a little bit on this one. The thing is that if you get into one of these writing programs, it's like you're in the big leagues. Like you've been invited to play in the NFL, right? What you do when you get there is up to you. So you should definitely make the most of it. Most writing programs have assign you mentors, like Kirk was talking about. It's up to you to build that relationship with not only your mentors, but like with people like me. Like I'm not going to chase after anyone who has been given this opportunity to see how they're doing, to see if they have a new script, to see like what's going on in their life. If you keep in touch with me for more than just when you want to get staffed, by the way, like you shouldn't just be coming and jumping in my inbox during staffing season. You should just be in touch and let us know what's going on with you throughout the year or throughout whatever. I would say that it's really up to you to build those relationships. It's very much, I'm going to go back to you being your own product. You are your company. You are your brand. You have to promote that brand and to sell that product. And so I would say you have to figure out the fine line of not being a pest and not like just saying, hey, Karen, I bought a new pair of shoes today. If they're fly, I want to know about them, right? But like if not, then maybe not. You know, like you have to build those relationships and take advantage of them, because really you have been given an opportunity by getting in these programs to get exposure on a level that you, I assume, never have before. And
Yeah.
so it's up to you to take advantage of that.
And I mean, like when you get into these programs, typically you're going to be in deadline, agent, managers, people are going to start to contact you. You can feel those, you know, in the way that you want to. I had a very aggressive agent at the time. I don't, he's not my agent any longer, but he did work really hard. And you know, one of the things that you know, for me is that I noticed that when the pilots did come out, I was like, ooh, I wrote a crime drama, and a lot of the pilots that came out, I wasn't sure if they fit what I had written and the other stuff, but I had another pilot that I had already written. And so my agent started to send that pilot out to people, and that's how I ended up going over to ABC, because that pilot got into the hands of John Ridley and Michael McDonald at ABC, and then I ended up getting on American Crime. So again, like you want to have one more than one product. Like if I didn't have that other script, then I don't know what would have happened. But
Yeah, I would say just make sure your portfolio, you know, that's what we call it, is a portfolio. Make sure that it is wide ranging. Like I know a writer, there's a writer who came from our program. This is not something I suggest. It kind of gives me like hives when people get into the program as a drama writer and then say, I want to write a multi-camera, because I'm like, what am I going to do with you? You know, but there are writers who can do both equally. And I would say if that's who you are, then make sure you have samples of both, you know, whatever. Or if you are just a drama, you know, just straight out drama writer, but you can write procedural as well as you can write a character piece, then make sure you have a good sample for both of those, because when something comes up, you're going to want to be able to have something to show.
yeah, and like my samples, one is a teen drama about a LBG. I can't even talk today, but like high school, and the other one is a crime drama, kind of similar to what happened in Ferguson. So they're
Yeah.
completely different pieces of material, but they've gotten me like, and you know, and some of those things I continue to work on afterwards. And so, like, you know, I got on 13 Reasons Why and American Crime with my YA piece, because that season they were doing teenagers in high school. And then, of course, 13 Reasons Why and Runaways, all those are YAs. I got on Jack Ryan with that procedural.
And I will say, in terms of you, who you are as a writer, knowing your story, like Kirk's dad is a cop. So like he draws from that experience. If you have an opportunity to interview for a procedural or some kind of a cop show or a lawyer show or something, talk about your uncle's cousin's brother who had a big impact on your life, who was that cop, lawyer, fireman show that you're interviewing with. Like you, a showrunner is going to want to know that you have a personal connection and you can bring your life experience stories onto that show. So, I mean, don't lie and say that you used to work for NASA if you didn't. But if you know someone who did, if you say my neighbor, you know, was an astronaut and I went over their house all the time, and you want to work on a space show, you better talk about that story.
Exactly. Let's see. I think that we're good. Well, Karen, I thank you.
You're welcome. And if you guys have questions, you can just tweet me those questions afterwards, and I will try to get to as many as I can. So
I appreciate you dropping by, Karen. You saw me.
I love you, Kirk. Anything for you, my friend.
Thank you. All right.
He's massaged this relationship really well. It'll never end.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Good luck to you. I wish you all well.
All right. Thanks, Karen.
Bye.
Bye bye. Julian, where are you? Gio, unmute him.
Yo.
Julian.
Kirk, how's it going, man?
I'm good. Can everybody hear Julian? Yay, yay. Yeah. All right. We can. Okay. What's up?
This is the first time I put on clothes in a while. So I'm excited to be here. It's thrilling.
Cool. Julian hit me up again and was like, "Hey, can you invite friends?" I was like, "I probably should do that so I don't have to talk a lot." So, I will say, Julian. So Julian and I were both in the program at the same time at Writers on the Verge. Um, we had very different experiences in the program and outside of the program. So, I'll let you guys like put over questions for Julian as he talks. But just to start off, because I need to run to the restroom because I've had too much wine. That just to start off, just let them know about yourself and then like how and why you submitted to programs.
Okay, cool. So I'm on the comedy side. Kirk pretty much has cornered the drama market, but I started wanting to work in late night TV, and I got into an NBC program. I think it was the first year. It was the Late Night Writers Workshop. I had been submitting joke packets to late night shows for a few years. I'd been a writer's assistant in New York. I was living in New York at the time. So when this program opened up, the Late Night Writers Workshop, I had a packet already of material, backlog. So I was like, kind of ready for that moment. And I submitted, and I was lucky enough to get in. And that was my first foray into a writing program. And the following year, I had put together a couple of scripts to submit to the NBC Writers on the Verge program, and I was committed. I think you guys talked about it earlier. I was in New York, so I was committed at that point. I was like, I'll go to LA if I get in this thing. So I moved. I moved to LA when I got into the program, and it was like a crash course. It was a graduate school program in a way, and it's kind of up to you to make it what you wanted. The people that I met in the program, the other writers, the execs, that's the access that you hope to receive when you apply to a program. Yeah, you sharpen your skills as a writer, but for me, it was the social aspect, the connections that really made a difference. So I think you guys talked about this as well, but like what happens after the program? Well, if you're Kirk, you get a job within 2 weeks. If you're me, it's about a year and a half later. So there's a lot of self-doubt going on during that time. I took I took a writer's assistant job after Writers on the Verge, thinking that I was maybe making a parallel move or taking a step back because I had already been a writer's assistant, and script coordinating jobs, kind of anything I could. And then one staffing season, I just got lucky. Two I had two showrunner meetings that year, um, and one of the shows didn't get picked up, and the other show did. And I was lucky enough to get on the show that did. So even if you do nail your meetings, chances are that show may not even get filmed. So I
Zero control over that. Like, no.
yeah, I had no idea, but yeah, it's humbling. It's humbling. I was going a little nuts. I talked to Kirk about this, and the people that like I said, that I met in the program were the best people to commiserate with, because we all had very varying degrees of success or lack thereof right after the program. So regardless, it was good to talk through experiences, commiserate with people. But it's you can feel sorry for yourself for a second, but no one else is. So you got to kind of pick yourself up and take the job that you think, or the opportunity you think will put you again in the best position to get hired the next go around?
So I'm gonna squeeze one other person in here. Latoya, are you in here?
What up?
What's up?
Hey.
Hello, everybody. That's Latoya Morgan. I'm gonna go back and forth in between Latoya and Julian. Latoya went through the Warner Brothers program. Am I correct? Yes.
Yep.
And Latoya actually was just announced her show with J.J. Abrams. She's running the show with J.J. Abrams, y'all. Just like. Wow.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
So again, Latoya was one of the, when I was going to enter the program, she had did an interview with a writer who covered a lot of the programs. And I read her interview when she got staffed on Shameless coming out of the WB program. So I just want you to tell them a little bit about your WB journey and, you know, before we became the rock star that you were, you know, destined to be today.
Thank you. Warner Brothers was great. It's similar to a lot of the programs. I think all of the programs are great, to be honest. Warner Brothers runs sort of like a simulated writer's room. So you have to go in, you have to, first of all, have a spec script and a pilot or some sort of original, whether it's a feature or a play, have that ready. Be ready to go hard in your interview. I know you guys are gonna talk. If you haven't talked about that, hopefully you will talk about that.
Yeah, I'll let you guys talk about your interviews. I talked about mine and how my first one sucked, and then my time around I had to reel myself back in. So if you want to talk about that, go ahead and do that as well.
Just in the interview process, first of all, it could be just you and one person. It could be you and their whole entire team. It was me and a couple of people. And you just have to be able to talk about yourself in a casual way, but also at the same time be able to convey why you want to be in this program. And you have to walk that fine line of being passionate and wanting to show that you really are excited about it and you want to be here without sounding too crazy. Because when you start sounding crazy, that's when people are like, I don't know if I kind of want to have you. Yeah. So it's really like a fine line of enthusiasm and then, you know, just don't go too far. But the key is you have to be able to tell a story about yourself. So you have to be able in a very succinct amount of time, talk about who you are, where you're from, why you write what you write, and why you would be a good fit for the program. Those are like the big headlines. And of course, I think my rule of thumb for any interview is to go along with the flow of the conversation. So, you know, you're sitting there and you're like chomping at the bit. You want to pitch or you want to talk about like why you should be here, but you got to wait till that part. You got to kind of feel it out. You can't, it's like, you got to make love to the interview, you know? You got to like do a little bit of foreplay before you get to the good part. So you really have to just lay it out there and follow the flow of the interview and not try to wedge in stuff before your interviewer is ready to get there. So I had a great interview. The program is run like a simulated writer's room for 6 months. So you go through all the process of doing outlines, writing a new spec, writing a new piece of original material. All throughout that time, you're meeting with executives, your mentors. They're giving you advice and notes on your script. You're constantly revising stuff. And then towards the end of that program, during like April, May, that's staffing season. So they would send you out on interviews. Hopefully you get showrunner meetings, but none of those things are guaranteed. So like with the Disney Fellowship pays you. The Warner Brothers program doesn't pay you, but they also don't guarantee that just because you got in here, like we're not going to guarantee you that you get a job. So guess what? You still got work to do.
A lot.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people don't realize, like they think, and again, like I don't have anybody in the ABC program in here, but I'll just talk about what I know. Like, listen, and I'll just be for real. Like, you know, that ABC program, when they get you in there, it's paid. But typically what happens is that when you get in the ABC program, you go into that room as a diversity hire or as a writer, you're not a part of their budget.
Right.
So, like, technically, you're there. They're going to use whatever they can use out of you. There is no guarantee that you're going to be let back.
Yep.
There is none.
Yep.
And so, one, you have to make sure that you stand out. You have to make sure that you make connections with the showrunner, the other writers in the room, because there's no guarantee that you're going to be asked back for the first season. A lot of times, you get on these shows, in particular, like I know LaToya started on Shameless. But, you know, you're going to bounce around. That's part of TV. You're going to bounce around. But before we get back, I do want to ask you and Julian, first, what spec did you write to get into the program?
I wrote, so I applied 2 times to the Warner Brothers workshop. The first time I didn't get in, and I was like, fuck you. I was so mad. So I almost didn't even apply the second time. And all my friends, I was like, I'm done, because I was a perpetual finalist for all these programs. So the ABC program, CBS, Warner Brothers, and I was like, I'm done with this. I was like, I'm not applying. And my friends, the year before I had gotten to the top 5%, and they were like, no, you have to apply again. Like, you get merit for applying, you know, more than once. And I was just like, I don't know, man. And so finally they convinced me. Like, I had a short amount of time before the deadline was coming up. I blasted out a script. So the first time I applied, I wrote a Dexter script. And so they had a meeting with all the writers, like if you made it to the top 5%. And we went around the room and said what everyone wrote. So everyone was like, I wrote a Dexter, and I wrote a Dexter. And I was like, oh shit, that's the problem. I wrote a script that was oversaturated. So they had gotten too many Dexters. So the next time when I applied, I was like, okay, what is a show that I love that showcases what I can do as a writer, that may be a little tiny bit off the radar? And so I wrote a spec for Sons of Anarchy.
All right, Julian, what'd you write? Thank you, LaToya. What'd you write, Julian?
I was trying to think the oversaturation thing is real. So I was trying to think of, and not just because you don't want the reader to have fatigue, but if a show's been on for a while, they've done a lot of the ideas that or variations of ideas that you might end up wanting to do. So unless you're going to sit and watch every episode to make sure they haven't done it, it might be in your interest to know that you have a completely original take, or do something that is on the upward trend that not that many people might be doing right now. So when I applied, I think it was Brooklyn Nine. I wrote a Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It had just won. Andy Samberg just won a Golden Globe. It was halfway through its first season, so no one really knew the show, and the first season hadn't even aired completely yet. So I'm like, I can make this show whatever I want it to be. So I had kind of a blank slate, and picked a theme and something that reflected, my sense of humor to insert into that world and those characters.
So I'm going to just answer one question, because LaToya talked about a little bit about it, and I talked about it, about not wanting to submit. So I have a little thing here. I call it submission fatigue. So I will say submission fatigue is not what you all are going to think I'm going to talk about. Submission fatigue really is like pride and hurt feelings. Like, you technically are supposed to be writing, especially if you're not a working writer, you're supposed to be writing a pilot or something every year anyway. So, like, if you're doing this, then, like, the only reason why you don't want to submit is because you're mad. Or because you're or because I'm like, I was a finalist 2 years in a row, and I'm like, fuck this shit. I'm 2 years in a row in this. They don't want to pick me. Where my feature at? I don't want to deal with these people no more. And so I was tired of submitting to the programs, but really I was like tired of not getting picked. Like, I was tired of not being like chosen. So there was a lot of pride. There was a lot of ego there. There was some hurt feelings, because I was like, well, damn, I done this thing twice. I felt like the second time I did all the right things. Everybody at ABC, I thought, like, loved me. And then I didn't get in. I'm like, oh my God. And so I'm like, so mad. Like that mad is like it makes you tired because you angry, so you mad, then you wearing yourself out. But at the same time, it's like, well, you if you're writing every year, if you're writing a spec, if you're writing a pilot or whatever, then like you have the material right there for you to submit. So just submit and be ready. Latoya, I know you talked a little bit about your experience and about, like not wanting to submit. Like what was that for you?
Um, it was fatigue. It was really, I felt like I was always the bridesmaid and I was never the bride, and so I was just tired of it. And I was also working a full-time job, and then you're trying to continue to believe in this dream, and no one from my neighborhood or where I came from had ever tried to do this. I didn't know any writers and then, so it's just like everybody in your family is like, can you please just get a real job now? Can you please stop playing? Like, and so I come from a very blue collar family, so it was a real thing to be like, hey, I'm gonna try this fluffy like thing of trying to be a writer, and no one except for
Yeah.
my mom really believed in me. So it was just hard to do that every day. And so you have to commit and you have to persevere because you're going to hear a lot of no's at the beginning. A lot of no's. It's just a wall of no's, no, 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 constantly. And so you have to thicken your skin and just be ready to fight if you really want it.
And I would say like perseverance, and I talk about this a lot, is super important. I mean, it took me 9 years, I think, for me to get staffed while I was here. Like, you have to stand the test of time. I had a bunch of jobs. Like I said, I worked at a psychic company for 2.5 years, worked graveyard shift. If you don't understand the type of people that call psychics at 2 o'clock in the morning, just like imagine. So Julian was in my Writers on the Verge class with me, so he would see a lot of my psychic stuff because I was juggling the psychic job and doing Writers on the Verge at the same time. So I would go to work from 12 to 6, and then I would go to Writers on the Verge from 7 to 10 or 11, and then I would go back to the psychic company from 11 to 3 a.m.
Yeah, I would drop you off at the psychic company
Yeah,
sometimes.
because sometimes we would go out and have drinks afterwards. Now y'all know I'm supposed to be going back to drinking to work, but listen, whatever. I don't work that no more, so I don't care. But like, it was, and it was difficult for me in the program because I was like, I have a full-time job, and there are some people who are married, some people who were, as Julian would say, living with his parents. There were some people who had just moved out here. Some people had jobs, some people didn't. Like Latoya, I had a full-time job. So it was very difficult for me. But what it did show me is that I could write much faster than I thought I could write. Because having to do the program and like work and know I only have a few hours to get stuff in, we had a lot of very strict deadlines in these programs, and you had to get them. And yes, we could sometimes send an email and be like, but like Aaron really was not trying to hear that often. So you only get like one of those, you know what I mean? So like, I really had to learn how to write fast and trust what I wrote was good. And then also realize that part of TV writing is rewriting. Like you don't want to give your executive or you don't want to give your showrunner bullshit. You want to make sure it's good, but that person is not expecting it to win an Emmy in the first draft because there are going to be depending on the show, there are going to be so many drafts of that thing. So it doesn't matter. So like, I would say one of the things about the program is that it did build a confidence in me to be able to be like, all right, I can actually crank out pages that are semi-good and, give me a couple days and they'll be all right.
Yeah.
But
I think go ahead. No, Julian, go. No, go.
This is a bit of a different question, but it got me thinking because Kirk was talking about perseverance and being determined and everything. Do you guys, this is for both of you, do you feel that you would be a writer if you had not gotten into a program? Do you think that you still would be where you are had you not gotten into a program?
I would.
I'm gonna say yes. I'm gonna pop my collar. I don't got one, but I'm gonna say yes. I would. Yes.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know I would have been a writer professionally, but I was also a writer from such a young age. I was writing stories since I was like 6 or 7 or 8 years old. So it was so much a part of my DNA that it was undeniable to me in my mind. I was like, this has to be my job. There is no other job that I'm put on this earth to do other than this.
Yes.
So I feel very confident that I would be.
And
Yeah.
I feel the same way. I feel the same way, and that's what I think is an interesting trend among us. Is the programs, while they are an excellent entry point and very valuable, streamline the process, whatever. There's a certain switch that I think we all have in our heads that is on. We're gonna make it in some capacity at some point, regardless. But in the meantime, we're gonna write until that happens, or we're gonna get there.
Right.
And I think that's a really important thing to, when you do encounter that wall of no's, having that in the back of your mind, knowing that this is inevitable, it's still going to happen, it just might not be yet, is extremely valuable to help you keep going. That worked for me, at least.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna answer a question right here. I'm gonna just switch just because I see a couple people say I second this question. It says, did you change? I'll answer first, and you guys can just tag along. It said, did you change your essay or bio the second and third time around? I did, but my themes didn't change. So like I wrote, so I'm blind in my left right. I'm blind in my right eye. So I lost my eye. Yeah.
Like, what's up?
I lost the vision in my eye right before I started high school. And so my first essay I wrote was about me losing my eye and how, because my eyesight was very sensitive to the sun, I wasn't able to come outside. So all I could do was write. Like I didn't have anything else to do but just write. So I was mad. And so I just wrote. And so my essay was about writing angry poetry as a teenager and how that got me into writing. But I talked about, me losing the vision in my eye, and it was also still about me and my father and the way that we dealt with that situation. And all of my essays that I wrote, every 3 years, always did include something about my father and I. It's just something that I'm very passionate about. I love him to death. We've had, back and forth. It's been ups and downs, and he has really informed who I am as a person, who I am and what I believe in, and the way I look at life. And so I put him in those essays, even though I changed it. The scenario was different, but the thing about he and I was the same. It was, my first one was about trying to understand him and how he was a police officer, and as a kid who, was gay, like how do you find that common balance? And my experience was a little bit different from Latoya's in that, like, I had my mom and dad were ride or die. Like my aunt was like, well, when he gonna come back home? And like my mom was like, don't worry about when he gonna come back home. Worry about when your child gonna get a job. So that was my mom. So like, and like you said, your mom was really, but both of my parents, and like I needed a lot of financial help. Listen, it is expensive living out here, even if you have a job. So, my dad was very much that. My mom was my, the person on my back. My dad was my bank account, until I was able to, to get where I wanted to be. So I had two parents who were very supportive. But again, like Latoya said, they have been supportive of me since a young age. I started writing one-man shows when I was in high school. I got to perform for the president in the 11th grade. And then I did it in college. My parents traveled all over the country, from Houston to Alabama to DC, watching me perform. And so they knew that this was something that I really wanted to do. I applied, I took the LSAT, applied to go to law school, got accepted to UGA. And I was like, I don't really want to do this. I really don't want to go to law school. And after I took the LSAT, that was the first time I wanted to smoke a cigarette, and I knew it was not for me. So like I knew I wanted to be a writer, and most of my family probably thought I would be an actor because I had done so much of that. But you know, I started writing my own stuff, and it's just something that's been. You look back, it's something that has been like ingrained in me, like Julian said. It's something that you want to do. So I feel like yes, I would have still been doing this. And as far as the essays go, like for me, I it's only so much you can talk about in your life. But listen, if you lived a life, then there's a lot of ways that you can maneuver these questions and what to talk about. So sometimes you have to ask people like, what are things about me that you see? What are some things that I've told you that you may not even think that like I may not even think is interesting? Like again, like I talked about the girl who learned how to drive at 40. She didn't think that was interesting. I was like, you learn how to drive at 40? Like that's crazy. Just so you can move to LA? Like that's what you need to be writing about. That shows so many things about her. So and bam, she got into the program that year. So like I feel like you never want to give any of these programs the same thing twice. Like nothing. Don't give them the same script, the same spec. Maybe some people have.
I have.
Okay, go ahead.
Not the same script. I would never do that. But my essay, I didn't change my essay. Because I felt so strongly about what I had written the first time. The first time my essay was really about, I don't want to be judged by the color of my skin. I want to be judged by the content of my characters. And that was what the essay was really about. And it was about how I really loved different types of genres. And I didn't want to be pigeonholed into writing certain things. I love sci-fi, I love drama, I love dramedy. And so I really talked about those influences that I had from my childhood that informed me as a writer. So I was like, I can't get no better than that. So this is who I am, take it or leave it. And then I wrote a different script though.
That reminds me of the angle I took too, because part of the thing is like I don't always want to say, you know, I don't always want to have to explain my background like culturally or ethnically or whatever. Like that'll hopefully come up naturally in conversation. But the angle that I ended up taking on in my essay, if I remember correctly, was how I get very passionate about things. And I always find when you're passionate about something, you find a way in. Like that was like the basis of things. And I used an example of how I loved comedy so much. I always wanted to work at SNL. How do you work at SNL? Somehow after college, I found my way there as an intern. I had no connections or anything. And that's like an indication of like, this is the kind of approach I have to everything I do. It didn't have to do with, you know, I didn't really talk about my writing style or anything, but it was a personality style thing that I think I led with. So yeah, I think there are a couple ways to really, and I felt strongly about it too, because that's who I am. Like you're saying, Latoya, is like, if it defines you, if it's through your writing, through your personality, if that shines through, I think you have yourself a good calling card, a good essay.
On the side here, I see someone asked, okay, so if this one, it's basically, can you submit the same script, but to a different program if you didn't submit it the year before? I mean, if it still falls in line with what the show is doing and that program hasn't read your script, yes.
Yeah, to a different, you mean like if you submit it to Warner Brothers and you submit it to ABC, yes, you can do that.
Yeah, I'd say do that. Then the follow-up question to that was, if they placed high using a pilot in, you know, the year previous, should they use that pilot the next year? No.
You have to write new material. And also, just in general, that's just good practice. So you should always be generating new material no matter what, because you're just going to be getting better. It's like you're strengthening a muscle. So you just want to be doing that all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I would never submit the same thing to any, especially a script. I mean, if you didn't get in the year before, like,
you need to change it anyway.
So you're not getting it this time. So that you need to change that. So I would say definitely change the script. And also just for you as a writer, like I tell this to people all the time because I ask writers like, well, what do you watch? And then like it's a pause. What we doing? You trying to be a TV writer. Like there are like 500 shows on TV. And if you don't like any of them, you probably shouldn't be working in TV. Like if you can't tell me like shows, like I'm like, what shows do you like? And you're like, well, I kind of don't really like nothing on TV is really great. Well, one, that's not true. Like there's so much TV. There's a lot of great stuff on TV. So now you're just being lazy.
That's a good point, Kirk. It came up. So it came up in a bunch of meetings. I remember this very clearly. They asked me, what would your ideal show to work on be? And I was caught flat-footed. I didn't know in the beginning. I didn't know how to answer that question. It's like anything that will hire me, but that's not an acceptable answer. So,
well, one way to get around that too, and this goes across like fellowships or if you're just taking general meetings, you should look up the shows that the place you're meeting at does beforehand. So if you're going to CBS, look up all the CBS shows. And hopefully you like one of them, and talk about that one. Because you never want to go in a meeting and be like talking shit about people's stuff. So make sure you do your homework so you're saying the right thing. I have a general rule of thumb to try to be positive in all those meetings. But that question, always in a meeting, someone will be like, oh, so what are you watching? Be prepared for that question because it comes up a lot.
Every time.
And sometimes you just, you watch everything and then your brain freezes. Yes. So literally look it up before you go. Be like, oh my God, what did I watch in the last week? And just have some conversation points to talk about.
And like, if someone says like, what shows do you like? Don't be like, I don't like none.
Well, that's to me a red flag. If you're saying you don't like TV, like why are you trying to write in it?
Yeah, but the thing is, it's like, well, I'm gonna make it better. Like, listen, like, no, like, you're not that special. Like, honestly, you're not. So, like, find something that you like, and like, you need to. There's just too many shows for you not to like TV. Like, I feel like there's just so much out there. Whether it's comedy, whether it's drama, it's just types of comedy, types of drama, half-hour drama now. Like, there's just everything. So I feel like there's a way, like there's definitely avenues and there are definitely things for you to watch. You just have to like watch TV.
You also have to, can I just say, you also have to think about the person you're talking to and how that sounds to them.
Yes.
If someone who's spent their life working in TV, you're like, well, forget what you were doing. I'm going to make it better because you clearly failed. It just sounds so bad.
Exactly. Someone said about the original scripts that we did. So like, I didn't have to submit an original script to get into the program, but I do have an original script. I'll say what mine was. I mean, I had to, so the script that has gotten me the majority of my job, the script that I pretty much sent out to everyone, it's a script called Alternatives. It's basically a teen drama set in a high school for gay, lesbian, and transgender kids. There's one like it in New York. It's the only one like it in the country. So I wrote, I love OC, I love Gossip Girl, I love My So-Called Life. So I read all of those, was like, how can I turn this into something that was mine, that was my own? And so, I took, the knowledge of that school. I went to visit it, and I took that knowledge and I turned that into sort of a pilot and a coming of age story. And so when Karen earlier talked about like opening up worlds, like that's a world. Like I have not seen a TV show where we're going into the doors of a school that are only for gay, lesbian, transgender, intersectional. Like we didn't have that. That's not something I saw. So again, you want to, when you're doing your original pilot, you don't want to necessarily say, well, oh, this is on TV, so let me write another version of that. Like you want to write something, hopefully you do have something to say and you have something that you want to put out there. And from that, I'll go to LaToya.
What was my original piece? It was a feature script, a little independent drama that was my calling card script. It had placed in the Nickel Fellowship. And it is literally the script that has gotten me like all the jobs that I've gotten, every showrunner pretty much that I've ever worked for has read that script. So that's why I always tell people it's okay if you don't necessarily have a pilot. If you have something that's good, that expresses your voice really well, that people have responded to in a way that shows that it has some legs, you can use that, whether that's a play, whether that's a short story, whether that's a feature. So,
Yeah. Julian?
Well, what was my original?
Yeah.
I wrote about an experience I had working in New York's Chinatown, and kind of like the behind the scenes of like my life was as a tutor. I was a tutor to an SAT class of first generation and immigrant children, and it was a bizarre place for me to be. It was bizarre for them to be listening to me, but it kind of encapsulated the main idea, which is I think like a running theme in everything I tend to gravitate towards, which is being an outsider and feeling like I don't know what I'm doing, that whole fish out of water thing. So I wrote about the observations of being kind of, we were all like fish out of water in that experience. And I ended up writing about that. And that's kind of been a script that has gotten me some mileage. I've used it. I still use it for, to get meetings and for certain job opportunities. So
let me tell you, so like when we were in Writers on the Verge, like Karen would do this thing where like she would like say a script was a drop the mic, and she would like say like it was good. So Julian wrote the longest comedy pilot ever in the history of comedy pilots.
that's why I answered the question. Don't write a 1 hour comedy.
So Julian wrote the longest comedy pilot, but because it was so good and it was so funny, like you got 2 drop the mics.
I'm maybe. I don't, the other one was, when we wrote a spec.
You and Matt got 2 drop the mics. I feel like y'all would have dropped the mics. Whatever, but Julian wrote a long ass comedy script. Don't do that unless you are as funny as Julian, and then maybe it'll work. But Julian, they want to know like what's the page? What should the page count? What should the page count be? As
if you're doing in a comedy script, if you're doing a single cam comedy, I would keep it, if you can, as tight as possible. So 35 pages and under, but like the closer you are to 30, 31, probably good. If you're doing a multicam, like the ones that we write are probably like 40 pages. So if you keep it, but I've seen pilots that are up to 52, but if you can keep that around 45, I think you're okay. So single cams around 33, 35, and then multicams around 40 to 45 probably.
I see someone saying, what about 30-minute drama? This is what I'll say to that, because I see Barry and Dead to me. I mean, and Latoya, correct me if I'm wrong, or Julian, I think like for WB, I mean, they're going to have a list of shows because we're talking about specs.
mm-hmm.
Like, most likely if Barry is half hour, it's probably going to be under comedy.
Yeah, Barry will definitely be under comedy. I can't even really think of a half-hour drama recently. The first thing that came to my mind was like, Enlightened, and that was a while ago.
Yeah, I think Homecoming was a half-hour drama.
Who's putting Vita and Insecure? Those are comedies.
Those are comedies. Yeah, like those are. I mean, they're not necessarily like joke a minute.
Yeah, but they're considered.
They're considered comedy.
When they go for the Emmy, they are in the comedy category.
Yeah.
Like again, and since a lot of these shows, a lot of these programs are asking for 2 samples, like you're gonna want those samples to be like nice cousins to each other, and so they should sort of show like who you are as a writer, what you can do. And even if they are different, sort of like if one is a YA and one is a whatever, like the tone should mirror each other. Like there needs to be some sort of similarity. So like you doing like a On My Block and then doing like a This Is Us, you're not necessarily helping yourself out. in the spec world because like that's not gonna happen. And I would say like in the pilot world, I mean, honestly, I don't want to tell anybody like pick your genre because we all know of people who have crossed genres, but I would say as a young writer coming in, if you're gonna have two originals, like I would want those two originals to sort of be in the same genre. And now even if it's a feature, like that feature you wanted to still like feel like, oh, this person writes drama, this person writes comedy. So like you want to still feel like you are a drama writer or a comedy writer because especially early on in your career, you just kind of get like boxed into that. Ballers is a comedy, guys.
Yeah. I was like, I'm looking at some of the shows that are being named. I'm like, Homecoming is a drama though. So whoever said that one, Gold Star.
Yeah. Homecoming is like one of the only like half hours that I can think that I can say is a true drama. But again, like that's super tricky to do. And again, with WB, like you're gonna have to see if like that's actually even
if that actually might not even make the list.
Probably not because it's so weird. It probably won't make the list. Good Girls is an hour, right? Or is it a half hour?
I thought it was an hour, right?
I think so.
The heisty one? That one?
Yes.
Yeah, that's an hour.
Then listen, then if it's an hour, then like you need to stay in the drama world.
Oh, there was a question that I think is worth going back to. They said, do you have anyone read your work, or did you have anyone read your work prior to submitting? I think just as a general rule of thumb, it's good to have somebody, at least somebody you trust. If you're not in a writer's group or you don't associate with other writers, someone whose opinion you can rely on to read. And when you're and this is how I do it, at least, like when you're asking someone to read something of yours, ask them for a specific thing that you think that person would be good to looking for. For instance, Kirk is so good at picking apart like tone and vibe. So when I ask him to read something, it's with those eyes. There are other people that I may ask, like, does this structurally make sense to you? Does this, or someone I may ask, is this funny to you? But I do think it's important to have those people in your corner, or identify those people whose opinion you trust, and ask them specifically what you're looking for. Don't just give something and be like, hey, is this good? Like, it's not the easiest question to answer.
And you're probably gonna need those people like throughout your career. Like I still send stuff over to, like if I'm working on something, I still send stuff over to Julian. Like you're gonna just need that. Like people need to vet your work in some way. Like I'm not the greatest proofreader. I'm not going to front like I am. So, but I know that because of that, if a script is due on Friday, I know that my ass needs to finish that thing on Wednesday so I can have somebody go over with a fine-tooth comb, and then also myself so that I can get that done. So like you want people to read it because you don't want any going to the programs like grammar errors. Goodbye, you're out of there. Like they're like, oh well, like you couldn't even take the time to make sure you had the commas and didn't have all this crazy grammar errors. Like you're gonna be dismissed, and you could have written an amazing script with an amazing story, but it's dismissed because you didn't take the time just to polish your script. And so
attention to detail is important. And I've seen many scripts get tossed because they were just littered with typos, because it just looks like you don't care. So definitely have your group of friends. I would encourage people, if they haven't already, to join writers groups. I still have close friends from my writers group who I'll send things and say, please tell me all the places where I look crazy so that I can change it immediately and not look like a fool. So you got to have those people that you trust, that you know are going to be honest with you and really be tough on you, because that's the other thing. If I just want somebody to tell me I'm good, I'll call my mom. I don't need that. You know, I need somebody to tell me this doesn't make sense. You
Exactly.
really need to fix this, so I don't fall on my face.
Yeah. So I mean, like, again, like, you want your pilots and or specs to be polished in like every way. They need to be able to compete, because if that pilot that you're going to use, if you're going to go out and get a job with that, now you are in a pool with everybody else who's working, and whether they're staff writers, whether they're, and shows have budgets, and so there are only certain amounts of slots and places where you want to be able to get. So you have to make sure like you have those samples. I've been on jobs where they've read one sample and they've requested another. So I had to have another sample available, and luckily I have a few. Like, and I'm not saying you need to have 5 or 6 samples, but you want to have, and at least 2 pieces of material that you feel strongly about.
He's
That's
not saying you should have 5 or 6 pieces of material, but I am. You should. You most definitely should. And if you don't, you better get to writing. Because that's like my greatest fear. That was my greatest fear before I got a rep or I was on any show or anything, was someone saying, I really like you. I would love to read something of yours. And I not have anything. So you always have to have not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5. You got to have reserves ready to give people.
Yeah. And so, like she said, I mean, I use basically 2 scripts. I have 2 others. Like, you have to be ready. Like, that stay ready so you don't have to get ready thing, like in TV writing, is real. Because like they'll be like, oh, you had an amazing meeting, they loved you. And then you're like, oh, okay. And they're like, but they want to read you again. And you're like, oh, okay. And then that other script needs to be just as strong as the first one they read, because they don't want to think you are one-hit wonder or whatever. They want to know that you can consistently write well.
You can be like, pause. Thanks for wanting to read something of mine. Can you just hold on for 2 months while I finish this new piece of material? You can't do that.
Yeah, no, they you're not gonna have that time.
Yes.
So it is 8:05. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up because I am dodging work. So but I really appreciate everybody coming and logging on and listening to this. Julian, Karen, I know she's gone. Latoya, I really appreciate y'all.
Pleasure.
Of course, happy to be here.
Y'all know all of us on. So Julian is just is it Julian Kiani?
Yeah, just Julian Kiani. I'm happy to talk to anyone who has questions that we didn't get to. You can find me on social.
Chief Morgan Inc. and I'm Kurt Wright 79. Y'all know I'm always running my mouth, sometimes probably too much. But I am, these are really great people who are definitely passionate about making sure that other people work, get job, get staff. I can call them about anything. Latoya had to hear me complain about a whole development situation. You hear me complain all the time. We have to call each other to check on. That's another thing. Like, we call each other to check on about certain jobs, showrunners, who we're working with. This is a very small community. So, like, be kind to people. It's really not hard. These are 2 of the kindest people that I've met in the business. And them just even reaching out to me and saying, hey, I want to come through and drop some knowledge, just shows like how much they really do care about this profession, and also like about all of you all, and making sure, because there's enough room for everybody. There really is. And so I don't believe in competition, because I believe what is for me is me. And so I want to be able for people to have a shared experience in what I've gone through, or at least to get people there. And so I always say I've been one of the lucky ones in this business. I have been immensely, immensely blessed. And so I want to be able to try to pour out as much knowledge and what I can into people. I really appreciate you, Latoya, you, Julian, for coming on and, shining a light and talking to everybody about this. Thank y'all.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
All right, y'all.
Bye.
All right. Bye.